This mountain is a good representation of what's happened to the wind industry worldwide. You can go up the mountain and you come down the mountain, and that's exactly what's happened to the wind farm industry worldwide. Its share prices have collapsed. And somebody should tell at Miliband. This is the share graph price of Orsted, the biggest wind farm business in the world. And this is Ed Miliband, our energy minister. And Orsted seem to have blown a big hole in the plans of Ed Miliband already. But before we get to that, let's just take a wider look at the wind farm industry and what's happening to the share prices throughout the world. Here is the Orsted share price for the last 5 years, and you can see it peaked in 2021, and then you can just see the gradual decline until here today. It's a drop of about 80% from its peak. That is a considerable drop. So here we are. Orsted cuts investment plans and torpedoes Miliband's Clean Power 2030. Yes, it does. It's just got a big hole in its plans. Now, Orsted actually had Hornsea 4 project awarded in the round 6 of the auctions. Round 7 doesn't look very good now, with people like this pulling out. But what's going on here? Well, let's look at Orsted a bit more. What actions have they taken with this collapse in share prices? Well, after last year getting rid of their finance chap in charge of it all and getting rid of the operating manager in charge of it all, they've now got rid of the chief executive as well. But are they alone? Are they alone in this huge drop in shares, this 80% drop? Let's look wider than just Orsted. Nordex are a wind turbine company, and they went with share price from there down to there. So very similar. They're in like collapse in terms of share price. Let's look at another one. And here we are, Global X Wind Energy. Same story. And of course, there is Vestas Wind Systems here. Just look at the collapse here. Nice slow decline, suddenly off a cliff, and then look at the net price we've got now. Well, that looks pretty devastating for the industry so far, but surely the Far East has got this right. Surely the Chinese companies in the wind industry have got this right. Well, let's take a look. No, it's still the same mountain shape. Share prices have collapsed everywhere in the industry. But hold on here, look at Equinor. Theirs is not a total collapse, theirs is very different. Yeah, it went to a peak around the 2021-22 period, especially in the 22 period when we had the Ukraine war, but it hasn't collapsed fully. And the reason for that, of course, is Equinor do both renewables and fossil fuel, and in fact have now merged with Shell. So they're basically buffered by the real world underneath, their pretend world wind energy, and they're buffered by the fact they have fossil fuel. Now at this point, I'm going to show you a secret, but you've got to promise not to tell anybody what I'm going to show you. You must not let this out, especially to our politicians and Ed Miliband. And it's here, this graph. Now this graph shows the growth of coal, oil and gas in the world. And the truth is, we're burning more oil, more coal and more gas than at any time in our history. In fact, all this green movement, I know you shouldn't tell people like Net Zero this, but we're burning more than we've ever burnt in history. So we're producing more and more CO2 regardless of what all these green movements do. So maybe that company, Equinor, had the right idea, the fossil fuel bit. And maybe the other side is beginning its natural collapse, because I think it really is. And I think they're going to run into all sorts of troubles. Now, this natural collapse in share prices, and in the end, share price is about two big factors: risk, the risk you take in those shares, and the profitability of those shares, what profit, what return you get. Those are the two big factors when you invest. And obviously, people don't see that anymore. And don't forget, it's the institutions in the main, the pension funds, etc., that invest in all these things. And just like sheep, a lot of them went diving into it and then realised and are pulling out of it. Yeah, about the worst investment you could get by the looks of it. 80% drop right throughout the industry, right? But not in the fossil fuel side. No, that's doing okay. So providing you don't tell anyone, because it must shatter them to realise that all the trillions that are being spent, all the ruining our economies, all the exporting of our industries to China and India and so on, all of that has had no effect at all. And of course, they'll moan about us, eating meat or tiny little things, yeah, and just ignore this graph. So with all I've shown you so far, no wonder people are falling out of love with investing in sustainable green funds. And here we are. There's actually evidence now that the market inflows have halved as the ESG fallout continues. So, Mr. Miliband, you're going to have a real problem with your round 7 of the auctions to get more wind and solar. And you're going to have a real problem with the fact that green funds are no longer really sustainable. They're too risky and don't give the return to compensate. Full stop. Professor Gordon Hughes, University of Edinburgh, did some work and he's updated it in 2020, and the work was on the economics of wind farms. And what he's got to say here is particularly interesting, and it explains why this collapse has happened. So here we go with the simple explanation. But you can look up his paper. The link is below in the description to this video. If wind farms do not receive off-take prices that are higher than the market price, or very much higher in the case of offshore wind, their expected revenues will not cover operating costs after 12 or 15 years. Operators will either cease production or drastically cut operating costs, leading to the closure within a relatively short period. There is no way out of this trap because operating costs are linked to reliability, and the decline in reliability with age means the high operating costs must be incurred to maintain production. The consequence is that the assumption made by BEIS, which is DESNES now, and many investors that expected operating life in new wind farms to be 25 or 30 years is completely at odds with the underlying economic reality. Few modern wind turbines operate more than 20 years, and many offshore wind turbines are likely to be decommissioned before they reach an age of 20 years. So basically, the operating costs are so high, and the bigger the turbine he's found, the faster they deteriorate. And so in reality, and this professor has examined huge amounts of official data from the wind farm people. So why then does this link to the investment drying up? Well, it's explained in the next bit here. It is standard practice for offshore wind operators to refinance completed projects, in part by bringing in passive investors such as infrastructure funds or groups of pension funds. This allows the operator to recoup some of its investment, thus realising part of its expected profit or limiting its potential loss. In other words, they sell off the job and get other people to invest and buy them out of that bit. That's where they make their money. However, investors might be well advised to steer well clear of Krieger's flak. The fundamental problem is that gross cash flow is likely to be consumed by debt service for the initial 12 to 15 years. Any cash extracted by Vattenfall will merely increase the risk borne by the passive investors. Well, I'm going to simplify that for you a bit. Look, the wind farms develop the wind farm. They're all working and so on. They then basically sell it on to pension funds and other people. Let's take pension funds as a perfect example. So they buy what they think is a long-term investment based on a 25-year life or something. Now, what happens is, don't forget, interest rates have risen a lot. They have borrowed money. So when they take over that business, as it were, it's got a lot of debt. Because interest rates have risen since the Mecca day of wind farms a few years ago, and interest rates may be 1/5 of what they are today, it was easier then. Now, the first 10 or 15 years, all you're doing is paying off the debt. You're not getting much, but you should have 10 years of really good stuff then? No. Because the operating costs in reality are so high that after about 15 years, that's it. And you'll spend the next 10 years, the operating costs absorb all the profits. There's no money left. You've been sold a pup, basically. That's how it works out. Now, Professor Gordon Hughes' paper is detailed in a link below in this description. You can read it in detail if you want. What he's found is that the bigger the turbine, the bigger the problem of the maintenance and the higher the costs. So the old small turbines at 2 megawatts and that, they lasted quite a long time. But as you increase size, the costs really mount up and the length of life shortens. And so that is the nature of the problem. But the market speaks for itself, and you can see now that people aren't, with the share price, and the risk and returns aren't valuing them very highly. Hence you've got people like the biggest wind farm set up in the world, the Danish one, pulling out and saying, no, even though we've agreed the price now, we can't carry on like this, because basically they can't raise the money. They can't really develop at this speed and do it in that way. So they've pulled out, leaving a big hole for Ed Miliband in his plans. But the hole's going to grow now, because in round 7 coming this year of the auctions to get more and more of this wind and blah, 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 ain't going to happen in the same way he wanted. The only way he could make it happen was to get even more extreme prices and penalise you even more. Well, he's such a fanatic, he may do that. I don't know, but it'd be a very silly thing to do. And because, you know, I think the wind has gone out of the business, actually. I think that's what's happened. And it applies to both the turbine manufacturer, that's the hub at the top, if you like, and also to the whole, the firm that develops the whole wind farm. It isn't just the wind farm developer; it's parts like the turbine. And we've had to rescue a wind vane manufacturer in the Isle of Man, haven't we? So it's all beginning to fall to bits. Now, it could be that because Professor Hughes published his paper in 2020, he has been partly responsible for exposing this scam. We call it what you like. I'm not accusing any individual company of doing a scam. I'm just saying generally, just look at the details yourself, an 80% drop. So, and look at the ones that did well. They had fossil fuels built into their model and have gone all fossil fuel nearly now. So, and of course, none of this makes any sense, because we're not doing anything to deal with the CO2. What they see is the problem, but I like CO2. We want more of it. Scientifically, the world would be much better off with more CO2. The quality of life would be better for everybody. So I'm going to finish now by just doing a few things, and one of them is to thank a researcher. His name is Julian Barton, and he's helped me. He phones me up and we have a chat, and he'll often say, have you seen the wind farm share prices and the plummeting? And I start to look, and Julian is the kernel for this one, for example. He's the start of it. And so it's great to have a researcher help him. I really do appreciate that. And the other thing I want to say is that in these videos, I don't script them. None of my videos have ever been scripted. And so I just try to get them out as fast as possible to have a message out. So even when I come to the detailed science bits, I don't script them. I just talk out top of my head. And I do that because I can get them out in quantity. Otherwise, it'd be so slow. And the more important thing is to get the message across. So I speak to you as if you are sitting in front of me. That's the way I do it. With that, I would like to say thank you for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it and learned from it. We are seeing the beginning of the end now. It is past the peak, but we've got Ed Miliband in our country as the problem. Luckily, America's got Trump, but we haven't. But that's going to have a ripple effect, I'm sure. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.